Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar for the Individuals and Societies faculty. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. My name is Helen Devine Costa. I'm the Vice Principal for Post 16, and I'm also a member of the INS faculty with a specialism in geography. So it's a real pleasure on many fronts to be here this evening. I'm just going to invite Mr. Alex Murchie to switch on his camera. Alex is our esteemed head of Individuals and Societies and is also a fellow geographer. So you've got the best of the best here tonight of the geography department. That's what we think anyway. So the way this will work is in a moment, Alex is gonna take over and he's gonna give you a short presentation, give you lots of information about Year 7 Individuals and Societies. There is an opportunity to ask questions, and I would just encourage you to wait for 5 or 10 minutes, let Alex go through the presentation because he may well cover some of the things that you might have some questions about. If you do want to ask a question, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little Q&A chat symbol. If you click on that, you can type your question in, and I will be behind the scenes answering some of those questions if I can. And we might take a few questions at the end and we'll sort of give the answers to you then. So we'll just see how that goes. But I think that's pretty much all you need to know about the functioning of it. So I'm going to hand over to Alex, who will take you through all the exciting info. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Helen. So hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Alex Murchie, and I am head of INS. I think one of the problems that we face is that not everyone's clear what individuals and societies actually is. For many of us, we're probably more familiar with it as being called humanities. And so I'm just going to run through to start with what the INS faculty looks like, how it's made up, and then I'm going to focus in a bit more on, well, for the rest of it, on Year 7. So I'm just going to share my screen with you all now. Hopefully you can all see it. So I just wanted to let you know basically what INS is. So my job is to be the head of the faculty, and in our faculty there are 6 heads of subjects. So there are 6 subject areas. I'm also head of geography, and we have a head of history, PRS, which is philosophy and religious studies. We have a head of economics, a head of business, and a head of psychology. And then we have subject teachers under that. So we're actually the biggest faculty in the school in terms of subjects offered, and also in terms of the number of teachers that work in it. I've highlighted 3 people or 3 subject areas here. So that's green for geography there, and pink for history, and yellow for philosophy and religious studies, because they are the subjects that are taught in MYP in Year 7, 8, and 9. So currently, students pick up economics, business, and psychology later on when they enter Year 10. And I just wanted to share with you who is teaching Year 7. I am not teaching Year 7 this year, but we have Mr. Head, Mr. McCrory, Miss Darling, and Mr. Devine Costa who are. So here, this is just to put a face to the name if you haven't had a chance to speak to them. And I'm sure this PowerPoint will be shared with you. So there's their email addresses as well if you need to contact them about anything that's going on in specific lessons. So whilst we're a really big faculty, this is the team that teach Year 7 INS, and Year 7 INS is made up of those 3 subjects: history, geography, and philosophy. So I'll just show you what the plan is for our year. This is the plan. So what the structure of Year 7 INS is that each student has 1 teacher for the whole year. So and they rotate through the subjects. So we've had 1 rotation already of geography, which finished in the middle of September, and the students are currently learning about philosophy, and they're all working on their end of unit assessments as we come to the end of term. And then next term, they will switch to their history unit. Then they return in April back to geography. And the final unit is an integrated unit where we attempt to try and pull together all of the main ideas or skills and concepts that we've covered throughout the year in one sort of integrated, fun-packed, all singing, all dancing extravaganza that I will attempt to talk about in a minute. So that's how Year 7 is organised, who teaches them, and how it's spread out across the year. This is quite a wordy slide, and I think, well, hopefully you're already quite familiar with some of the ideas that are on here, but I'll talk as if this is brand new to you. So in INS, we don't do what you might consider to be traditional tests at the end of units. We are trying really hard to try and think of creative ways to assess them that really gives a chance for everyone to shine. So not only are we trying to be quite creative with our assessments, we're really trying hard to think of a wide range of different types of assessments, so everyone has a chance to really showcase what they've learned and the skills they developed. There are 4 assessment criteria for INS. They are knowing and understanding, investigating, communicating, and thinking critically. So when we write a unit of work and we create an assessment, we have to take this into consideration. And all of those bullet points that are on there, which I won't read out, during the course of Year 7, and Year 8 and Year 9, every year, every student will be assessed on each of those bullet points. We call them strands, at least twice. That looks enormous. So that, just to reassure you that we would never attempt to assess all of that in one assessment. In fact, sometimes we might just assess on one strand, and we might just have a very short assessment, and others might be a little bit more complicated. For each of those assessment criteria, so for knowing, understanding, or investigating, communicating, thinking critically, the students can achieve a maximum mark of 8 for each one of them. So, for example, if an assessment assessed knowing and understanding and communicating, they'd get a mark out of 8 for knowing and understanding, and a mark out of 8 for communicating. So they might get a 6-6 or a 7-5 or something like that. Just give you a second to look at that, and we'll move on. Okay. Now, one of the ways we try and format all of our assessments is using this idea of grasps. So every time a Year 7, 8, or 9 INS student has an assessment, before they even start it, their teacher will share a sheet with them, and on that sheet, it will go through this grasps structure. So for every assessment, there is some kind of context to it. So we're very clear on what we want the students to achieve, what role the student is taking on. So we might ask them to be a curator of a museum, or a board game designer, or an artist. We're very clear on who the target is. Who are they doing this piece of work for? So it's not just we're writing this to display knowledge to show my teacher. We get them to try and imagine, for example, that they are creating a museum exhibition, and their final outcome, their museum exhibit, is for people visiting the museum. We put it into context, and we try our hardest to make it clear what our standards for success are. What will for us will count as success. Now go back one slide. So every time we do an assessment in INS, we will give them at the start, before they even begin working on it, a version of these strands that are specific to the task. So they know right from the beginning exactly what they are working towards and what they need to do to succeed. And with the move from on Zoom to increasingly using Google Classroom, we will make sure that information is on Google Classroom so they can keep coming back and referring to it. So they really know where they're working on an assessment, what they need to do well, and we want them to achieve the best that they can. So we use graphs to try and help us be as creative as we can and do assessments that are broad and diverse and give everyone a chance to succeed. So I just thought I'd talk briefly about the 3 subjects that students follow in Year 7. The first is philosophy. So this is run by Miss Rule. This is a quote from her. The Year 7 MYP philosophy course is called Truth, It's the foundation of philosophy. What is the truth? Students explore objective and subjective views on the nature of truth, culminating in an assessment exploring their personal views on the nature of ultimate reality, which is what they're working on at the moment. So this is a really exciting, creative unit where there's lots of discussion. And one of the things that's really brilliant about it is that throughout the unit, we encourage students to share their own perspectives on things. So we have a very diverse community, and the students, we're really encouraging the students to share their views on things, their experiences, and it does lead to some really brilliant discussion. Now, the statement of inquiry for this unit is that different perspectives on knowledge and belief influence the way we view reality. So that is the question that sits over the top of the whole unit. And here are some of the questions that they look through as they're working through the unit. I'll let you read them. You don't need me to read them to you. Now, the outcome of this unit is a piece of art, and they eventually produce an art gallery exhibition alongside some written work which they have to produce, which describes the process they've been through and what the art, in what way the art represents their beliefs in ultimate reality. It's quite a big thing, but it's really good. So we actually use these as an entry to a quiz or a competition in the UK, in which 2 years ago one of our students won. So her piece of writing, her essay, and her artwork were featured in a website that went to students around the world. So this is what they do for their philosophy, and this is an example of what the students get in terms of their grasps. So their goal is to be able to express personal beliefs about the nature of ultimate reality. Their role, they have to pretend that they're a famous artist who's been commissioned to produce an artwork which expresses your beliefs. The audience for this is the WIS community and parents, but also those people who are running the quiz in the UK. The situation is that we're producing an exhibition demonstrating artwork. The product is very open. They don't have to do a painting. We've had sculptures. We've had amazing bits of woodwork come in. Some students this year are doing a dance. So we really want them to try and draw on their strengths. And they have to reflect on how and why they've expressed their views in this way. So there's written work that goes alongside it. And the completed piece of art with evidence of planning and reflection to analyze and evaluate the results. Here's some examples of a bit of art that's been going on this week in our lessons. And that brings us to geography. Obviously, geography is my subject. In the geography unit, there are two. I'll talk about one in more detail than the other. This is the unit that they've already finished this year, so some of you may be familiar with what they've been doing. In this unit, we're really trying to get students to think about some of their basic geographical skills, describing landscapes, mapping routes that they're familiar with, but also we're really trying to get them to think about the value of education. So really try and think about why they go to school, and then we try and open it up to comparing what their experiences are to students around the world who have a very different experience, for example, in the photograph on the screen. So we have a goal, as much as we possibly can in INS, to draw on the experiences that students have as a starting point. We want them to learn about Hong Kong and their experiences in Hong Kong as a launch pad to learning about other things elsewhere. We're also really conscious of the Sustainable Development Goals. So throughout the INS curriculum, in every year, they will have a unit which focuses on a Sustainable Development Goal at least once. So in this one, we focus on Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which is quality education. And the outcome of this is, one of the two assessments for this is a sort of factual cube about Sustainable Development Goal 4. Here's a photo of some that are in my classroom at the moment. So they take on the role of being experts of Sustainable Development Goal 4, and they're linked to school mission to foster global citizens, which we have at West Island. And the audience is for Year 6 students at Kennedy School. So imagine that they're using these cubes as a learning tool in their classrooms. The other geography unit, which will come later in the year, is a fieldwork investigation in the school into microclimates. So we'll move on in this quick whiz through INS to history. So in history, we develop an inquisitive nature and love of learning about the past. So in Year 7, students challenge preconceptions about Indigenous groups and explore a topic they may not be familiar with. So in Year 7, the unit of work is on Native Americans in North America, and they look at it in the context of migration, and they look at it in context of cultures meeting each other. And the idea here is that what they're learning in that context, we ask them to try and make connections between what's happening in the modern world or what they might see in the news or their own personal experiences. And in this unit, the outcome is, or two outcomes. One is they learn how to write peel paragraphs. And the other outcome is that students make and create and play their own board games. So you can see a photo here of some Year 7 students from my class last year, I think, they spent ages making these games, and then they sit and play them, and they reflect and assess each other on how successful the games have been. So already you can see we've had sustainable development goal cubes, pieces of art with reflective writing, and the production of board games and the writing of peel paragraphs. So we're really trying to assess them in as wide a range of skills and experiences as we can, and we have avoided deliberately traditional tests. So we're trying to get them to develop an inquisitive nature and love of learning about the past, develop a broader understanding of how past events can link to different conceptual ideas. My light's gone out in my room. Build a foundation of historical skills that are important for further study of history at higher levels. And I'll leave you to look at that for a second. This is another example of how we've used goals to put the whole of the study into context for the students.
Just Alex, just while everybody's reading that, and just popping in to remind you, if you have any questions, just please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen there. Thank you.
My classroom light's gone out, so hopefully that's not. Look at the PowerPoint. Okay, and then the last part of the year, if you remember, I talked about the plan for the whole year. At the very end, we have an integrated INS unit. Now, the integrated INS unit has traditionally involved us going on a field trip where we go to Hong Kong Museum of History, we go to a temple, and in the past we've also visited the Kowloon Walled City Park. So we try and really get them to work on their research skills, their collaboration skills, and their communication skills. And the outcome of this is that we convert the entire INS faculty, 2 floors of the school, into a museum with exhibits, and they have tables, they can make things, and we invite all parents into school, and it's the parents that assess the work. Now, obviously last year we couldn't do this, so we rewrote it, and the students worked in groups to produce websites along the same idea for the museum. We couldn't go on the trip, so we're hoping that things will settle down in time for us. But if we can't do the trip and the museum exhibition, then we will revert back to the building a website. So here's some photos of students at the temple doing their research, and here's an example of one of the exhibits that students made a little while ago. And you can see we open the walls of the classrooms and invite parents in to come and have a look at the exhibition. So I think that's everything I have to say. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Helen, I'm assuming now we're going to do questions.
Question. Hello. Yeah, so somebody asked, and you mentioned that we do peel paragraphs.
Yeah.
And somebody just asked, what do we mean by a peel paragraph?
So peel paragraphs are a very useful transferable skill, and they're skills that you can learn in Year 7 and use and reuse all the way through to university. So we're trying to get them to write paragraphs of writing which are a bit more structured. So peel gives them the structure of essentially point evidence analysis. So they make so for example, students even in GCSE try and write too much in one paragraph, lots of ideas all jumbled up. So we're trying to make them make one clear idea, back it up with evidence, take some analysis of it, and then link it onto the next paragraph. So it's a routine to teach them how to write structured paragraphs in their extended writing.
Okay, thank you. Another question, you'd mentioned the skills, we're trying to develop the skills in INS. What are the main skills you think that students develop in INS?
Well, there's a lot. I think if we had our whole INS team here, they would all tell you one that's different to the other. But in geography, for example, in year 7, we're really interested in, and this sounds like something that's quite simple, but you'd be surprised how even older students struggle with it. And that's to get really good at describing what is in front of them. So we spend a lot of time giving them photos. We take them onto the roof and look out across Hong Kong and just describing and using descriptive language to say what they can see before they try and explain it or justify it. I think we spend a lot of time looking at skills that are useful later on, like writing pure paragraphs is a skill, like map skills, but also we're interested in skills that are critical thinking, as it's one of our assessment criteria, the fourth criteria that I showed you earlier. So there's quite a wide range of skills that we work on. We've also done things like we've back planned things that we know will come up in the future. So we know that when they do extended essays, they will have to have a certain format in which they lay out their work and which they use a works cited list. So in INS, we've created a year 7 version of all of that, which is much simpler to start tuning them into some of the things that they'll be using in GCSE and in diploma.
Thank you. Another question was I guess about differentiation is what's being asked. So for lots of the INS subjects, they're very language rich, and some of these tasks might be quite difficult. There was a lot of information going up there. What kind of support is there for students who maybe struggle with the language, the vocabulary, or just putting together, say, an extended response?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say that you're right. Some of the slides had a lot of writing on, but a lot of the outcomes aren't necessarily text heavy. So often students can do incredibly well because they are assessed in things like communicating is one of the assessment criteria. So built in within the criteria, it's not designed only for writing. So the actual tasks, there should be enough variety across the year for everyone to achieve success. Within individual lessons, we make really good use of our Google Classroom. So our INS teachers, all of our resources are there usually half a term in advance. So there's plenty of opportunity for students to look ahead. A lot of our lessons have a lot of scaffolding. So we might have a task where a student can choose to have quite an open piece of writing, and then the same task will have a version of that question, but with sentence starters or a word box underneath that they can take vocabulary from. So there are lots of opportunities to develop language. And I think something actually we've worked quite a lot on in the last couple of years. So I haven't got anything to hand now, but I'd be happy to share anything where we've done it.
And I think also as well, there's always extension tasks, isn't there? So if students finish a piece of work or finish a particular part of a task and want to be extended, there's always options for that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in any of the issues that we learn about in INS, they're enormous. So if a student needs extending, it's a great thing.
It's good. And then just a couple more questions. So this is year 7. Is it the same sort of model when they move up?
Yeah. So what happens in INS is you've seen how the year 7 year is structured, and that they have one teacher, they have 3 subjects, and then an integrated unit at the end. We do exactly the same thing again in year 8. So in year 8, they'll have one INS teacher for the year, and they will rotate through the 3 subjects. And at the end of the year, we do another integrated unit, but we switch the unit. The integrated unit at the end of year 8 is a really exciting unit about refugees and children living in conflict. We had a guest speaker from the UN come and speak, and then we ran a mini MUN for that assessment at the end. And then during year 8, students have something called mini options, and what they do is they select 2 of those 3 subjects, and in year 9 they will study those 2. So they drop 1 and focus in on 2. And when they go to year 9, they'll have a subject specialist teacher rather than 1 teacher. They'll have a geography teacher teach them geography, and a history teacher teach them history as much as we can.
Great, thank you. So I think that's it for our questions. We've covered the ones that people wanted. We will share the presentation with everybody early next week. So those of you that are on this webinar, Roshni will get the slides out to you so you can have a look over those. And as Alex said, if you want any more specific information, you've got your child's teacher's email in amongst those slides, and of course you've got Alex's email as well if you want anything more about what he's talked about tonight.
I think the best thing that you can do is to ask your child to show you their Google Classroom. I think the Google Classroom is a really great resource, and I think you'd be really, if you haven't done it already, just ask them to sit down and show it to you. You'll also see all the work they've done. Everything's there, and it's like a treasure trove of information. So have a look at it.
I'd agree with that, definitely. So thank you very much. Thank you, Alex, for your time and all your words of wisdom this evening. Thank you to VJ, who's behind the scenes, who's doing all the tech control for this webinar. Thank you, VJ, for giving up your Friday evening. And thank you to everybody that has also given up their Friday evening to come and listen to us, so we're not talking to ourselves. We very much appreciate you joining us this evening. So thank you, have a lovely weekend, and good night.